Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, August 23rd. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 10 days. The game against Michigan in 96 days. The 2021 Ohio college football. I'm just going to start over again. 3, 2, 1. Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, August 23rd. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 10 days. The game against Michigan in 96 days. The 2021 college football season kicks off with week 0 in just 5 days. This Saturday, Illinois hosts Nebraska as part of an abbreviated slate of games. This morning, we're going to be previewing the Big Ten by asking 10 big questions about the league. Get it? Because it's the Big Ten, so it's 10 big. Yeah, okay. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman. Tony, let's start on the west side of the conference and work our way back east. Let's start right at the top of the predicted standings. Tony, is this the best Wisconsin team we've seen in, I don't know, a long time, 10, 15 years?
I think they're as equipped as any, and probably more so when you figure in the potential of quarterback Graham Mertz. I still am waiting for the running game to emerge, which I think it will this year with Jalen Berger, who was a freshman last year and didn't have the best year. And, of course, he wouldn't as a true freshman. But I do think with the defense, I think they've got 7 of their back 8 returning. We know they're always very solid. The linebackers are always solid. And, yeah, it's no fun playing there, as everybody knows. And I think they're equipped. And, which Graham Mertz will we see? I think we're going to see a good version of him, and he's going to be bolstered by a better running game. So, yeah, I think they're my team to beat in the Big Ten West, although my Big Ten ratings aren't quite finished. So we'll see actually what I actually think once I do all of that math, but I expect Wisconsin to come out on top.
Maybe their best competition on the west side of the league this year is Iowa. And it feels like every year, there's the Iowa team. And when I say there's the Iowa team, you know exactly what I mean. It is a team that is like, oh, they're going to play good defense. They're going to run the ball pretty well. They've probably got a good tight end or two. And then it's just a question of like, is this a good Iowa team, or is this just like a regular Iowa team, or is this the rare like bad Iowa team that instead of going 8-4 goes 6-6? To me, this feels like if they get the quarterback thing answered, this has all the pieces to be a good Iowa team. Where instead of going 8-4, maybe they're 10-2, and they have a challenging game out of conference against Iowa State, but. Could this be a good Iowa team instead of just an Iowa team?
You said the quarterback question. I mean, they do have a starting quarterback returning. This is Iowa to me, even if they're a good Iowa team, to me, that is still a team that can go to Wisconsin. They do play Wisconsin and win, and yet also somehow lose at Maryland. And that's just even when Iowa in 2002 or whatever, they lost to Iowa State and ran the table, and they've lost to MAC teams in the beginning of the season and played well after that. And so there's even the good Iowa teams, there's always some sort of a stumble, or you shouldn't have done that, because I think they do have to play better and they have to be more perfect than a lot of teams. But yeah, I think they're good for Iowa. So yeah, but is that 9 wins? Is that 8 wins? I think right out of the gate, Indiana at home and Iowa State on the road, we're going to learn a lot. But again, they could go 2-0 in that and then still lose a few weeks later at Maryland or some crazy trip up. But they do have a fairly decent Big Ten schedule where they can get some things done and maybe get that to that 9-10 win thing if everything falls properly.
They have Spencer Petras back as their quarterback, and that was something when I talked to Chad Leistico months ago at this point on the Morning Scoop to preview Iowa. It was kind of like, yeah, they have Spencer Petras back. We'll see whether that's a good thing or a great thing, depending on how much he has improved since last year. It was just kind of last year he was just kind of like generic, brand X Iowa quarterback, sort of generic middle of the road. Like, yeah, he's fine, he's not terrible, he's not great. It's just kind of like, yeah, he's an Iowa quarterback, and when I say Iowa quarterback, that's exactly what you're thinking. So how much has he taken a step forward? That may be what kind of determines whether this is an Iowa team or a good Iowa team, or maybe more than that. Next one, this is going to be one we're going to get an answer to relatively soon. Does Minnesota have enough offense to hang with Ohio State in 10 days? Because it feels like they're going to be able to, Ohio State's going to probably put up mid-30s, low 40s points in that game. There are questions, obviously, about the Ohio State defense coming off of last season. but Minnesota lost Rashad Bateman. Minnesota's missing some big pieces from last year's offense, but they've got a really good offensive line and a really good running back. So do they have enough offense to hang with Ohio State in 10 days, or is that maybe not a great matchup for the Gophers?
Well, and then they suffered an injury to their top wide receiver, Chris Outman-Bell, this past week. And I guess he's week to week right now, but we're getting into the week to week mode where week to week means Ohio State. And so it's right around the corner, and they need him to help take some load off that running game, which I think will be very good. Tanner Morgan the quarterback needs to be 2 years ago, Tanner Morgan, as opposed to last year. And it needs to, he's been here forever now. He's like the senior quarterback, 4-year starter or so, and now needs to make plays that, you can't rely on Rashad Bateman anymore. So you've got to make your receivers better instead of your receivers making you better. And if you're just a one-dimensional team, you're going to get shut down enough, basically. So we've seen Ohio State do that with Wisconsin in the past, even with Jonathan Taylor, the best running back in the nation. And if there's no passing game, you can shut that running game down because that's what they're going to be doing, focused on first. So I don't think Wisconsin or Minnesota has enough offense to hang with Ohio State. If Ohio State's offense is playing, a B- B+ game somewhere in there, then to me that they need Minnesota needs some turnovers to break some serves in there.
That is a team that has a lot of returning depth on that offensive line, returning starters on the offensive line. Mo Ibrahim, a very good running back, but Ohio State you've not been able to run on Ohio State in recent years. You've been able to throw on them at times, but you've really not been able to run on them. That's going to be, especially with that injury you mentioned. I mean, that's going to make that a tall task for them. Maybe the most interesting question on this list to me, and this is a team that I'm just fascinated by this year, Nebraska. Is this the year Nebraska finally turns a corner and at least makes a bowl game? Scott Frost's 3 years in, came in, everyone kind of went, well, if Scott Frost can't do it, no one can do it. 4-8, 5-7, 3-5 in his first 3 years. They've got some NCAA stuff going on right now. I don't think that's going to be a big issue for them, but it's just kind of like one more thing to just kind of have in the, it's sitting in the corner of the room and you just got to kind of look at it every once in a while. Is this the year they finally do kind of take that next step and at least get to a 6-7 win kind of bowl team?
You look at their schedule and it's full of teams they should beat or could beat. And at some point you need to win those games because they start out week 0 at Illinois. They could, I don't even know what the line is there, but that's a game that you should win. You could win. But yet if they lose, are we going to be shocked? No. And yet the only game on the first, say 8 games of their schedule, first 7-8 games that they can't win is at Oklahoma. They're at Illinois. Then they have Fordham and Buffalo. Technically, they could start 3-0. Then you lose to Oklahoma. Then you go to Michigan State. That could be a win. So that's 4-1. Then Northwestern at home. That's 5-1. Michigan at home. I mean, would you be shocked if Nebraska beats Michigan? No. So I mean, there's 6 wins right there, and all of these are very possible. And would you be shocked if they won at Minnesota? And would you be shocked if they beat Purdue in Lincoln? And then you could have Ohio State coming in with an 8-1 Nebraska team and top 12, top 10 ranking. Or none of that can happen, and they could be like 3-7, 3-6 when Ohio State comes to town, just because we need to see proof of life to expect to see some breathing and some movement. But the schedule lays out to where they should be in a bowl game. You keep waiting for it. And they've got, Scott Frost talked about they're bringing the black shirts. They're going to be naming some black shirts here in a little bit. So the defense is playing well, relatively, I guess would be the proper verbiage there. But man, they should be in a bowl game. If not, like, how much longer can you keep him around us? Although I think his buyout right now is something like $20 million.
It's $25 million. But if you've got NCAA stuff, that has a way of sometimes negotiating that buyout down a little bit, and maybe things are not quite so hard and fast. That has worked at Tennessee and Kansas and other places And when I say worked, I mean, maybe they paid less money. It didn't necessarily work long term, but in the short term, they paid less money. They are Nebraska, a 7-point favorite against Illinois this weekend. But you're right. I mean, that's what makes them so fascinating to me. Is you look at that schedule, and I'm sure Nebraska fans are looking at that schedule and going, "Oh yeah, there's like 9 winnable games here." You're not going to beat Ohio State. You're not going to beat Oklahoma probably, but you've got a bunch of winnable games. 9-3. The problem is when Nebraska is looking at the Purdue game, Purdue fans are also sitting in West Lafayette going, Nebraska, that's a winnable game. And it's like, if you polled every fan base on what their record is going to be this year, this time of year, the winning percentage adds up to about 750 in conference play. And it's like, well, the way math works is that's going to be 500 because it's 500 every year in conference play. So that'll be interesting. Week 1, they are 7-point favorite over Illinois, and its new coach, Bret Bielema. Bert is back. Tony, how long does it take before Bert says something that ticks off a bunch of people? Because I feel like the over-under is probably a matter of days and not weeks.
Yeah, I was surprised that nothing really came out of the Big Ten media days because there are a lot of people around him, more people than probably have ever been around an Illinois head coach before, just waiting like, he's going to say something. He's going to do it. He's going to say something. And he didn't. And he says he's matured. But let's see, as you say, like once the games start, let's see how long this goes, because it feels like that all it takes is one post-game press conference where, Scott Frost, who can also be volatile, maybe something happens between those two. And, but really then there's no point, there's no ability to exact revenge on something he said. But what's the over under? 3.5 weeks, somewhere in there where eventually he can only be somebody else for so long before he becomes himself. I think it does take some winning. Maybe if they win that first game against Nebraska, then he's going to be feeling his oats. And then he's going to start to, it's still me. It's still the old Bret. I still got it. And he's going to maybe say some things he shouldn't. And then he'll eventually apologize, as he always has. And the AD, like Barry Alvarez, always had to apologize for stuff he would accuse Ohio State of doing. So, that's his sort of thing. But first, I think the wins have to come.
But a week from now, I'm just going to paint a little picture for you. And you tell me, can you see this happening? Illinois beats Nebraska 27-24 on a last-minute field goal. Post-game press conference, he's happy. He's overjoyed. And it's like, well, Nebraska, this is a great start, but Nebraska's not, we're not worried about Nebraska. We have much bigger fish to fry. And then you've ticked off all the Nebraska fans, and the Nebraska fans are going to be in a bad mood anyway. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying I wouldn't be surprised if there's a post-game quote along those lines that comes out at some point. Nebraska's not the goal. We want to be better than that. And then it starts all over again. It's so good to have Bert back. I can't wait.
And they play Texas San Antonio the next week. What if he says something to the effect of, yeah, Nebraska was nice, but we take a step up in talent this next week against Texas San Antonio?
100% possible that's going to be, yes, got to watch out for those Roadrunners. Coyotes can tell you all about that. Penn State, let's talk Penn State. They started last year 0-5. And I think at that point, everyone went, holy pants, Penn State's 0-5, and then stopped paying attention. And then they won their last 4 games. So, this is obviously a bounce back season. I don't think anyone's thinking this is going to be a 5-7 Penn State team this year. But is this a bounce back to 8 wins? This is a bounce back to 10 wins. And then potentially, what does that mean for James Franklin? Because it seems like we've had 7 years in a row of Clay Helton might be in his last year. And if he is, oh boy, could this be James Franklin's job? So where does Penn State fall this season? Phil Steele has them picked as one of the, biggest bounce back kind of teams. Where do they finish, and what does that mean for James Franklin's future employment?
Well, they were done no favors by the Big Ten scheduling because they have to go on the road to Wisconsin and to Iowa, and those very well could be losses. Instead of, they could have gotten Illinois and Purdue some other year, and those would be 2 wins. So, I don't know if those two, I think those are 2 losses right there, and they open at Wisconsin, which is no favor. And then their next Big Ten game is like week 5 at home against Indiana, which maybe that's a toss-up. And then they're at Iowa. So I wouldn't be shocked to see them start 1-2 in Big Ten play and then really have to turn it on again towards the end of the season. And you still have a game at Ohio State and a game at Maryland, which, Penn State is obviously one of the most talented teams in the conference. I'm not super sold on Sean Clifford, their quarterback, based on what we've seen. We know Jahan Dotson can do all those sorts of things. They return a bunch of guys on offense, on defense, but I just don't know how good the engineer is, how good Sean Clifford is, and so I think, does he limit them? And they're not really recruiting quarterback all that well, or at least on the current roster. We'll see what Drew Aller does in the coming years, but the offense doesn't really blow me away just based on who is distributing the ball.
All right. And here's another one that is really two fan bases who probably have a little W written in Sharpie next to this game on their schedule. Maryland and Rutgers. I mean, these are two teams that have been linked since they came in together in 2014. Neither of them has ever beaten Ohio State. It feels like this is a year where at least one of them is going to take that next step, make a bowl game. Mike Loxley's been at Maryland for a while. Greg Schiano now in his second season, in his second stint at Rutgers. It feels like they're two programs on the upswing where, they're not great, but they're not dead anymore like they used to be. So which one of those teams makes a bowl game? Do both of those teams make a bowl game? Or is that 2 5-6 teams playing in the last week of the season, and the winner goes to a bowl and the loser finishes 5-7 and goes, oh, so close?
And that game is at Rutgers this year. It's the season ender, and it's maybe the biggest game in the Big Ten of the new teams to join the Big Ten, as long as we had a qualifier in there. I feel like, I think we have more faith in Rutgers, the program, and Greg Schiano than the Maryland program and Mike Loxley. Maybe Maryland recruits better, has some more talent, but Rutgers does the transfer portal better. And so I'm really torn on this one, because you look at, they both have to play Ohio State. The good news for Maryland, I think, is benefited by having to go to Ohio State. So one of their home games isn't wasted by having Ohio State come to town. Like, you're not going to win that game. You want to win all of your home games. And if Ohio State is one of those, that's not going to happen. So Ohio State goes to Rutgers. That's going to be a home loss for Rutgers. And so you kind of, you start to lose the ability to keep up. But then, of course, they could win that game at the end to get there. I want to say Rutgers, but I'm feeling Maryland because I think they have more offensive explosion and potential. Rutgers is just, I think, better coached though. So, but I'll go with the talent over the coaching.
Yeah, and that's a reasonable answer. And it's also possible that both of them could make it. I mean, that Rutgers has, I talked to Alex Gleitman about this earlier in the week. Rutgers has enough games that it's like you could win 6 without having to do I guess they could win that game, an at Northwestern, at Michigan kind of game. Like, you could get to 6 just beating the teams you probably should beat. And then there's a couple others that are maybe not quite coin flips, but you got a 35% chance of winning that game, 30% chance of winning that game, something like that. See, there's maybe a little more margin for error baked in there with the Rutgers. I mean, you're not beating Ohio State. You're probably not beating Penn State. You're probably not beating Indiana, but you've got some winnable games. But you gotta, when you play at Syracuse against a Syracuse team that's probably about to get its coach fired, you got to win that game. That's not a given. Absolutely, they could lose that game. I mean, even Delaware is a pretty decent FCS team, but you could lose that game, but you should win it. But you could lose that game because the margin for error is still relatively slim on a game-to-game basis for them, but there's enough maybes on that schedule that it's possible they both get there. Another team that is, I mean, the calculus on this team has changed a little bit over the years. They were always there's a bunch of maybes and maybe they can get to 6 wins and make it to the Gator Bowl. Now it's maybe they can win 10 games this year. Indiana, can they repeat their 2020 magic? Can they finish top 2 in the East this year? Can they maybe be ahead of Penn State? Or, I mean, they get Ohio State coming to Bloomington in what is almost certainly the biggest game in program history, or at least in the last 30 years, at least since Anthony Thompson was there. Can Indiana do it again? Or is that maybe like a 1-year weird COVID thing that, is going to be hard for them to repeat?
I don't know that I would chalk their success up to a weird COVID year. Not that you're doing that, But I do think Tom Allen has created something here, built on something that Kevin Wilson started. But you open up at Iowa. To me, that's a loss for Indiana. Week 3 is Cincinnati at home. That could be a loss. We'll go ahead and give that to Indiana now. But their second Big Ten game is at Penn State. So it's a lot like what we were talking about with Penn State. They open up with 2 really tough Big Ten games, both on the road. I expect them to start 0-2 in the Big Ten. Then, do they go 7-2, 7-0 in the rest of the conference that way? I don't think so. I think Ohio State's going to get them. Michigan owes them a game. They go to Michigan this year. Michigan needs that game. If Michigan is going to establish themselves or reestablish themselves or simply hold on for dear life, they need to win that game. You can't. What kind of world are we living in where we're chalking up an Indiana game at Michigan as a win for the Hoosiers in August? That's crazy town. But it's also reality because I don't know if everybody knows this. In the last couple of years, we've been living in crazy town. And so I guess that would follow. But then you get the old Oak and Bucket game at the end as well, where Purdue may not be great, but it only takes one game. It only takes one Saturday afternoon to be good enough to beat Indiana in a rivalry game.
It is crazy to think. I mean, you don't have to go back that far. I remember being in a car driving to Nebraska with you in, 2017, maybe 2019, one of those, where it was Indiana playing Michigan, and the whole game was like, oh, Indiana's going to do it. They're going to do it. It's finally going to happen. It's finally going to happen. And then, nope, it turns out Lucy pulled the football yet again, and Indiana found another way to lose to Michigan. I think there might have been a Bill Lynch gum throwing game against Michigan at one point where it was like they had it. Oh, they lost it. And now, one year, and it's like, oh, well, no, write that as a W on the schedule in Sharpie. Absolutely, they've got that one on the road at Michigan. Like, whew, that's we are through the looking glass here if we're at that point with Indiana football. But I mean, it's not as crazy as it might have sounded, and part of that is also because of the team on the other side of that, which is Michigan. And Tony, my question about Michigan, it's pretty simple: is Jim Harbaugh the head coach of Michigan this time next season?
Well, Tom, a lot of that will depend on how Michigan does this year.
Thank you. See, why do you always have experts on your show? Well, that right there, that's why you gotta really find the experts to get analysis like this. Would you like to expound on that at all?
Well, and that Indiana game that may be the decider, like whether or not he's back next year or not. If Indiana comes in and gets that win, and now they're 5-2 or just 5-3 at that point, or 5-6. Whatever, that's their like 9th game of the year, or 10th game. And you can't let Indiana come in and beat you in consecutive years. I do expect, every single road game they have at Wisconsin, at Nebraska, at Michigan State, at Penn State, at Maryland could all be losses. And even if they, what's the best case scenario? 2-3, 3-2, probably 2-3, given those games. I guess maybe 3-2 if you want to give them some credit that they certainly have not earned. But I like the changes that they've made on the coaching staff in terms of changing just to change. We'll see what Mike McDonald does on defense with those guys, but the talent's not there. And so that's, I'm trying to answer this question, Tom, in a way that allows me to answer it because I don't know. And I guess if 7-5 with a win over Ohio State, I think he's back. I don't see 8 wins here per se, and a loss to Ohio State. Is 8 wins with a loss to Ohio State enough to keep him?
I don't know if there's a number of wins that if they beat Ohio State, if they're 4-6 or 4-8, but they beat Ohio State, honestly, that might keep them around for another year. But I don't think they're going to beat Ohio State. That is my hot take. Speaking of trenchant analysis, you're going to get from experts. I have a feeling Ohio State may have a pretty good chance of winning the Ohio State-Michigan game this year. Here's the interesting thing with Michigan to me is how many sure thing wins, like absolutely write it in marker, are there on the schedule? Western Michigan, season opener, you feel like that's got to be. Northern Illinois, yep. Rutgers took them to overtime last year, so that's probably not. At Nebraska, like, I don't know, maybe. Northwestern at home. Is that it? How confident are you that this is going to be a Northwestern team you can absolutely stomp? Maybe, but probably not. at Michigan State. We all know what happened last year. Now you're on the road. Indiana at home, at Penn State, at Maryland, no. Ohio State at home. I mean, and the ones I skipped were at Wisconsin, no. I mean, Washington at home, no. I mean, there are like 2 sure thing wins on that schedule, and 4, 5. Like, yeah, I could see them winning that game. Having a good chance to win that game. 50% or higher, maybe. And then it's like, well, there's a bunch of like write it in marker L's on that schedule. I don't know. I think I'm saying no on Jim Harbaugh, coach of Michigan, this time next season, because I think there's a decent possibility they're 6-6, 7-5, and you lose to Ohio State at home by 30, and the stands are 50% Ohio State fans, and the Michigan student section's empty in the middle of the third quarter, and all of that just points to like this is not working. That just feels very much like how that's probably headed for them this season. We're going to be talking a bunch more about Michigan on the Buckeye Weekly podcast that drops on Monday. So we'll be doing a Michigan Monday podcast series this year. But yeah, spoiler alert, I don't think things are going to go great, but we'll see. We will see how that all shakes out. Tony, last question for you. Can anyone unseat Ohio State as the Big Ten champion? They have won 2017, 18, 19, 20, 4 consecutive years, undisputed, outright Big Ten champions, first time in conference history. Are they going to do it for 5th straight year, or can someone unseat them?
Yes, someone can unseat them, including Ohio State. That's the old cliched answer, but I keep going back to their performances in the Big Ten championship games over the years there's only been 159-0. The others have been pretty close, and they've had some talented teams that struggled in that Big Ten championship game. And I certainly think Wisconsin could get them in the Big Ten championship game this year, because that's just how things go. And don't know why, but it just happens that way. And there's a lot of pressure, and it's a new environment, although it's getting less and less new each year for the Buckeyes. But yeah, I think Wisconsin is capable of beating them in a Big Ten championship game. We've seen Northwestern almost do it. We've seen Wisconsin almost do it. So I'm not going to sit here and think nobody can do it. I don't expect it to happen, but I certainly think it could.
And yeah, I think there's almost this assumption that they're destined to go to Indianapolis. I don't know. I mean, you went through the Indiana schedule there. You went to the Penn State schedule there. It's, there are enough losses on there that Ohio State might be able to slip up once, maybe even twice, depending on who they slip up against, and still make it to Indianapolis. So yeah, that seems more of, Big Ten East champion for a 5th straight year seems like less of a question than actual Big Ten champion, because you're right. I mean, it takes one day. We have seen crazy championship game results where a team that's favored by 10, 14 points blows it. And so not out of the realm of possibility, but yeah, I think there is a reason Ohio State is considered the favorite, and a fairly prohibitive favorite as the Big Ten champion, for this year. So probably something, speaking of things you need experts to tell you, Ohio State probably can be pretty good at football this year, might win some football games. So hope you have enjoyed this analysis that you couldn't have possibly done by yourself. This is the kind of stuff you need us for. What you do actually need folks like us for is recruiting and analysis, insider information from the Ohio State team, so much more. That is all at BuckeyeScoop.com on our Ask the Insiders board. We have a fantastic team of insiders who can tell you just about everything you'd possibly want to know. We're going to have Kirk Barton. The plan is to have Kirk Barton on tomorrow's podcast to give you an insider report from inside Ohio State practice. We're going to have so much more coming up this week on the Morning Scoop, on the Buckeye Weekly podcast, on the Ask the Insiders board at BuckeyeScoop.com. Fantastic assortment of information during the busiest time of the year, probably for Ohio State football information as we head into the first game of the year. That is all at BuckeyeScoop.com. 1 week from today is also the world premiere of our documentary, Saving the Fight for Football 2020. Our documentary, Fight for Football, Saving the 2020 Season. That is world premiering next Monday at the Lenox Theater, right across the river from the Ohio State campus. To get in and get a chance to see it and have a live Q&A with Buckeye Scoop staff, you will just need to be a member of BuckeyeScoop.com to sign up and have access to that. You can sign up today. Reserve your seats. We are, I think, getting close to having a full theater, so you should probably hustle up and do that as quickly as possible. That is 1 week from today. It is almost here. It is really exciting. That is going to be a fantastic night. and you will probably be sad if you're not there. So sign up today at buckeyescoop.com. And we're going to have some other fantastic live events throughout the fall with maybe some road games, that kind of stuff. So you have to be a member of buckeyescoop.com to get access to all of that great stuff. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.